Hello everyone, I'm Troy Dodds and welcome to the On The Record podcast presented by the Western Weekender. On this podcast I'm joined by special guests who all have such great stories to tell about Penrith and the role they've played in our city. They are Penrith stories told by Penrith people. Today my special guest is Penrith Panthers legend Mark Geyer. MG won the premiership with Penrith in 1991 and post-footy has gone on to a successful media and business career. But it has been a roller coaster ride. I hope you enjoy our chat. MG, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Doddsy, my man. Great to see you, as always. You've always got a big smile on your face, and it's my absolute pleasure to be with you today.
Good to see you, and of course in the MG active jumper as well, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. Born on, of course, the 7th of December, 1967. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Auburn Hospital, and my mum and dad, my mum was 16 when she had me. My dad was nearly 19, and for my first 2 years of life, I lived in a granny flat at the back of my nan's house in Guildford, and then moved out to Wayland when I was 2.5 to a street called Karama Crescent. Lived there predominantly until I was about 17, then met the love of my life, who I'm still married to now, and Megan Alexander. Moved in with the Alexanders, and basically they haven't got rid of me since. So yeah, it's been look. So I'm a Wayland boy and very proud of it. Went to Wayland Primary School, went to Wayland High School, and then once I left school in year 11, I was a footballer until 2000.
Looking back on that, with your mum being 16, do you have an appreciation of that now about how difficult that must have been?
Well, mum had 4 kids by the time she was 24. And I've got a 25-year-old daughter who's single. I've got a 23-year-old daughter who's single. I've got a 27-year-old son who's engaged. But things are, I think these days there's a lot more to do for kids, i.e. travel and getting around the place. And so their priorities aren't kind of what they were back in the 70s and 60s, which was family. My dad came from a big family. Dad was the youngest of 10 kids. He was one of 3 boys, and he had 7 sisters, and Dad was the youngest. So they kind of all frowned upon the fact that Mum was so young when she got married, and I'm one of not many people who can say they were at their parents' wedding. Mum was 3 months pregnant with me when they got married, so I was obviously the reason they did that. But look, I wouldn't change a thing for how it's all panned out.
What kind of student were you at school?
I was very good. Yeah, I was a very good student. I was always a teacher's pet, especially from kindergarten. I used to sit up the front with my legs crossed, put my hand up for all the questions. We used to have milk deliveries back in them days.
Yeah.
I'd go get the milk for the teacher, and I was prefect in Year 6 and sports captain and all that type of stuff. And I think up until probably Year 9 was when I started to not be such a good student. When I went to Year 7 at Wayland High School, they had 13 classes, and I was in 7E2, so they judged it by English 7, English 2, so I was in the second highest. By the time I'd ended in Year 10, I was in 10E5, so I'd gone from 2 to 5, but I still was a pretty studious student. I loved the learning, I loved English in particular. I loved PE, obviously, like everyone loved that, like PD, we learned at school. Yeah. But then school kind of, I got sick of school when I realised that rugby league was what I wanted to do for my lifestyle.
So when does footy first come into your life? Either as a supporter or a player? Where does?
Obviously, mum and dad were mad Parramatta fans. When I grew up, so I kind of, in the early days, up until maybe 9, 10, I was a Para fan as well. Used to go to Cumberland Oval, sit on the hill, and one of the first memories I have is when the person would walk around calling out ice creams,
yep. And
I'd say to Mum and Dad, why are they getting ice creams out of a hot bucket? And he said, no, that's the ice, how cold it is, it's hot. So I would get the Cornetto and we'd have that. And then once they took down Cumberland Oval, I remember I was at Wayland Primary School and the teacher said, Mr. Brinley, my 6th grade teacher, he said, we're having a couple of rugby league guests next week. And I said, we're from Parramatta. Sorry, all I knew was Parramatta. Yeah. He said, no, from Manly. And so these 2 players one was called Simon Booth, who was a centre winger for Manly back in the 70s, and the other one was Graham Eadie. So straight away, Manly became my favourite team. I thought if they've come out this way to Wayland to come to us and teach us how to play rugby league, I'm going to go for them. So Wombat Edie was my favourite player, and ironically, found out like 7-8 years later, his brother Keith Edie lived 2 doors down from my uncle at Patonga on the Central Coast. So my uncle Dennis was neighbours with Keith Edie, who gave me a Manly jersey that Graham Edie wore. So all the irony of it all was that was kind of meant to be. I was always a rugby league. I started playing at 5 for Wayland. Bloke across the road called Mark Cremona, who was going to training, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm playing." And so I played up a year in my first year with his team, and that was it. Played 5 years at Wayland, then I played a few years at Northbound Druitt, a year at Rudy Hill, and then 2 years at St Mary's before I went to grade.
And of course, as it turns out, that's all obviously in the Penrith Junior District, so obviously your focus starts to turn to the Panthers at some point.
I remember, Doddsy, my first game that I went to at Penrith Park, and was with Wayland under 9s or under 10s, when the coach used to take the whole team to the footy. And Penrith back then didn't get sold out crowds like we do now. We were a struggling team, but the first thing I remembered was going down the back of the hill on cardboard boxes. Having that. We didn't watch much of the footy, but I couldn't wait to get back to Penrith Park again, so we'd get on the boxes and slide down the hill. So I suppose at probably 12, I was a state player for the PWSA. Jeff Bracken was my coach, and had players like Mark Blackburn in my team. Tyson Frizzell's dad, Andrew Frizzell, was the front rower. David Smith, who was all from Mount Druitt. We played at a curtain raiser at the SCG in 1979. Before the English and Australian Test match, so that was a bit of a buzz. But then I lost a bit of interest in rugby league from about 13 to 15. I really grew tall, so I went from about 5'8" to 6'4" in about 2 years, and I was really gangly and awkward, and so rugby league wasn't a priority. And I was about to give it away when a mate said, "Why don't you come play with us?" Because I was playing the first division all my life. I played first division, and it was getting too hard. So he said, we're in third division at St Mary's, having fun, under 15s. I said, okay, I'll come over. So I went over to St Mary's in the under 16s, and we played a few trial games, and we won them against Parramatta teams, and they put us in first division. And that was when I kind of started thinking. Jamie Jones was my coach, and he said, "Where do you play?" And I said, because I was the tallest in the team.
Yep.
I said, "I play 5'8". He goes, as if you're not playing 5'8" here, buddy. You're too big for a 5'8". So he said, "Get a pair of shoulder pads. I'm going to put you in the second row." And that was it. Jamie Jones put me in the second row. I never looked back, and made a couple of rep sides that year. I remember trying out for Jersey Flegg the following year when I was 17, and made that. And Tim Sheens happened to be at the game, that trial game, and at Blair Oval, and he said, "Mate, what's your name?" And I told him, and he said, How would you like to play on the 23s this year?" That was in 1985, and as a 17-year-old, I played every game that year on the bench, and got at least 5 or 10 minutes. Next year, I was captain of under 23s at 18 in 86 when we got to the grand final, and South beat us. And 87, I started off with the first grade team, training with them. Made my first grade debut in 87, and against the Bulldogs, and then I played 12 games and then got pneumonia.
Right, okay.
So then I was out for 7 weeks, and then I come back in reserve grade, and Graham Murray's team went through and won the grand final, and so I'm the only Panther to have ever played in 3 grand finals.
Yeah, wow, okay.
It's a good trivia question for you.
It is a very good trivia question. What are you doing for work around this time as well? Because obviously there's no full-time contracts going around at this 100%.
Stage. Yeah, well, I worked various jobs. When I first started playing grade at 17, I worked with a mate, Mark Shee, for B&G Welding at Blacktown.
Yep.
I was like a Boilermaker's assistant. Good money for a 17-year-old back then. And then I started working with my mum. She worked at Travanel Laboratories at Toongabbie, which is now called Baxter. I worked there for 18 months. Again, good money. And the best thing about it was that here I was 17 years of age, and there's 1,000 people work there, and there was only 50 blokes. So that was awesome.
Pretty good odds, right?
That was great. Christmas parties were good. And then I made grade the next year. Then I started to take things seriously. Once I made first grade in 87, Timmy Sheen said, I wouldn't mind you working closer to, because when I was working away from, I'd get up at 6:30 in the morning, travel to Toongabbie, leave at 2:30, come home, have a half an hour sleep, then go to training, and I was always buggered. So Sheensy organised me to work in maintenance at the club with the late, great Stevie Waddell, Kenny Gittins. Remember Kenny Gittins from Queensland? So us three were kind of the maintenance crew. Waddy was the tradesman, and me and Kenny were the TAs. We'd go around and change light globes, and it was great. And I loved working at the club. Every Monday me and Waddy would go up into the roof and have a sleep after a big Sunday night, and then I moved. Once I moved on from from maintenance, I went into marketing. Didn't know much about marketing. Simo was my boss. Had people like Carl Leddy there, and it was just a bizarre type of arrangement for me to be in, because I remember Simo said, "We've got this magazine, big fella."
This is the old Panthers magazine.
The old Panthers magazine. Yep. Quite simply, what you've got to do, you've got to sell ads for this.
Yep. I
said, okay. So what? Anywhere? He said, yeah. So I knew a bloke at the Pioneer Tavern who had a hairdressing a barber shop in Katoomba.
Yeah.
So I said, brah, I'm going to come up and see you on Monday about buying an ad in the because I've got to do that. That's my job. He said, yeah, come up. He said, no worries. So I went up and I said, this is the size ad in the mag. I think it cost $120 for him to run over 3 months.
Yeah.
And he paid me cash. He gave me the money. I went, how good's this job? I put it in my pocket. It was gone in 3 days. Sold it and spent it, and it's done. And Simo, about 2 weeks later, he said, that ad you put in the magazine for the barbershop in Katoomba, he said, looks good. He said, where's the money for it? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, where's the invoice? Or I said, oh, no, he's got cash. He just gave it to me. I thought that's how I got paid. He said, no, So it's safe to say that I didn't have much of a career in marketing, but then when I started to get better at footy, I turned towards schools, doing coaching clinics at schools and stuff with other blokes. And I really enjoyed that. That's what I really loved. I loved going out on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday and going to, say, Regentville Primary School and just doing coaching clinics. I don't think we do enough of them these days at schools, but that's another story for another day.
And of course, you happen to come into first grade at a time when things are starting to turn around for Penrith after a few dismal decades, to be honest. And you're part of that playing group that we all know that goes on to win the 91 title of the Greg Alexander, Steve Carter, John Cartwright, just a great group of players.
Yep.
Let's go into the sort of that 1989, 1999 part. First of all, what was the feeling around the club at that time? Was it that you'd finally arrived kind of on the scene, that Penrith was now a team not to be messed with versus the easy beats of the past?
I truly think so, but there was some really standout moments that made it happen that way. We had so from 86 when I played one game in first grade at the end of the year against Parramatta. Their last game was at Parramatta Stadium. It was Mick Cronin and Ray Price's last games, and they ended up winning the comp that year. So 87 was my first and only year with Timmy Sheens. I learned so much off Tim Sheens. He was the first coach he brought a lot of things back from America, i.e. group training with everybody. So every Tuesday night we'd have first grade, reserve grade, under 23s all trained together. And do skill work. One skill for 45 minutes would be defensive orientated games. He really brought professionalism in when professionalism wasn't the status quo in rugby league. He left abruptly before I really got a chance to learn a lot under Timmy, because I loved the way he treated me as a player. And we heard this coach was coming to Penrith called Ron Willie. And I'd heard about Ron because I was a Manly fan, so I knew Ron coached Manly. I knew he was a hard ass. And with Ron, he was bringing these players who I'd watched from afar: Chris Mortimer, Peter Kelly, Neil Baker, Penguin Bradley, Graham Bradley. And for the 1988 pre-season, we kind of changed overnight. We went from this meek and mild bunch of local juniors to this bit of aggro at training, Like and Ron Willie first said to me, I was 19, and straight away he started calling me Mountain. He said, Mountain, I want you to be the bloke that every other team is scared of. And our first game away that year in '88 was at Brisbane. And Brisbane had just beat Manly in the first game of the '88 season. Manly won the comp in '87. And I was sitting in my chair talking to whoever I was sitting next to. Usually it was either Cardi or Brandy or Vandervoort, Kyle Vandervoort or Kyle Bentley, Barry Walker. And I saw the Fox. That was his nickname, Ronnie Willie. They called him the Fox. He was walking up to me with looked like he had a box of shoes in his hands. And I'm sitting there, and he said, Mountain. I said, yeah, Ron. He goes, I want you to put these on. I said, what are they? And he goes, they're shoes. I said, I've got shoes, Ron. He said, no, I want you to put these ones on when you get off the plane. Put your ones in the box and carry the box out with you if you have to. So I put these shoes on and I stood up in the plane, and they're like, the old Barter Scout shoes, the black ones with the big heels we used to wear to school. Well, I'm 6'4", and when I put these heels on, they made me 7 foot. Like that was honestly. So I'm ducking to get out of the plane. So this is the first time I've ever seen mind games being played, and it happens to be me who was involved in it. The next day at the on the front page of the Courier Mail, I was on the front page of the paper. It said a Mountain comes to take on the King, because Wally Lewis was the star of the Broncos, but Ron Willie, in his wisdom and his years of experience, knew that the mind games were just as important as the real game. So they only beat us 8-6 or something. We had a really good game. But what we learnt from Peter Kelly, Chris Mortimer, Alan McIndoe, Neil Baker, Graham Bradley, then that core group of players was not to be these local juniors from Penrith who were just making up the numbers. They all taught us how to be tough and to not be disrespected by anybody because we're this satellite city, way out west. Everyone thought of Penrith, they went, oh, what, all the way out there. Kind of like we think of Lithgow now.
And it's interesting because that almost history repeats itself 30 years later, because this current Penrith team, there's a few stories that go around about, they're too arrogant, they're muggly. But that's almost a deliberate situation to go, well, no, we ain't going to be walked over.
100%.
And it's worked. So, and it worked back then too. So, it seems like critics just, they want you to sit in the corner and play nice, but that's not how it works.
I think Penrith did for 30 years.
Yeah.
Up until 25 years, we took to win the comp. And I think we did. I think we played nice. And I think we tried to be part of the competition because we were just happy to be there.
Yeah.
But once we started getting a calibre of player like Peter Kelly and Chris Mortimer coming to our club, blokes like myself and Cardi, Peter Kelly was like a godsend. We knew that every scrum we went into, no forward in that scrum pack was going to take it over us, because we had Peter Kelly. The back line felt the same. When you run out in the footy field and you see Chris Mortimer running out, every back felt empowered.
Yeah.
So that's how Stevie Carter learned so much off Chris Mortimer. Brad Izzard, Brandy, all these local juniors who were fantastic. We just kind of went next level with them, and we made the finals in '88 under Ron. '89 we made the finals. We had some ferocious games against Balmain at Leichhardt Oval in '89. 1990, obviously the history's there that we got to a grand final, and I think even though Ron Willie wasn't there in 1990, the fact that he'd brought Peter Kelly to the club and Chris Mortimer to the club was the reason we were there in 1990.
And there's a bit of that history repeating again in 2003, where Roy Simmons had coached that team for so long and brought a lot of those players through. 1990, it's been talked about a lot, but the community itself goes off it. Oh. Make the grand final, and it was the modern day grand final parade that you'd won it, because the city did have a parade down the main street before the game. Schools went crazy.
We had civics receptions. We had something planned every day of the week to go to before the grand final.
And when you look back on that now, do you think that did contribute to what happened on the day?
Without a doubt. We were so distracted that all of a sudden the game was here. And we didn't respect the grand final like we should have. And the similarities are still there with the current crop. They were there in one, and a lot of people say you've got to lose one to win one. History will tell you that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
I think it's the respect you pay the occasion that gets to you. We used to always have a drink on a Thursday night. Under Ron Willie's regime, it'd make us bring a change of clothes on a Thursday night. We'd go to the Australian Arms. everyone's got to have at least two beers. The squad of 17, whatever it was, you've got to have 2 beers, then you can go on your own way. If you want to have a lemon squash, fair enough, but have 2 of them.
Yeah.
So that turned into a bit of a bonding session without us even knowing it. Then we'd go to the club, the dollar drink night, no training on Friday. Saturday morning we'd do a captain's run, bit of touch footy, bit of this. Everyone would be talking about how good a night we had. And then Sunday we'd play, we wouldn't lose many games because of the mateship. Ron Willie bought it. So we were used to having drinks on Thursday nights, but in the week of a grand final, we went down to the Regent for the grand final breakfast on I think it was a Thursday. And so we're down there Wednesday night, and Gus is just, laying down the law. Gus was 32 years of age. A lot of people forget. He'd already won a comp 4 years earlier at 28.
Yeah, at Canterbury.
At Canterbury. So this is a bloke telling us, look, guys, you're in a big day on Sunday. You got to, enjoy tonight. This is a swank hotel. Go up and have a couple of beers with each other. Then hit the hay and let's get out there and let's eye these boys off tomorrow and make sure that we show intent. Well, we didn't. We went straight to each other and said, whose room? How much are we going to drink? How much are we going to order? And we ended up going to Kyle Bentley's room. Not the whole squad. I think there was about 12 of us who went to this room, and we looked at the menu. We said, oh man, let's get 4 of them, 10 of them. There's seafood platters. Was Dong Perignon, $1,000 bottle of champagne. So we'll dance up a storm. We're playing music. A lot of us had our girlfriends or wives who were overseas on Kentucky tours, ringing them reverse chill from the hotel for 20 minutes. It was we just were buggers. And then about 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on the door, and we were sitting around the lounge and dancing and singing, and someone said, Smitty, because he was the closest, have a look, who's that? Is it room service again? Smitty went over with a beer in his hand, and he looked through the peephole, and he went, it's Gus. We went, what? Oh, it's the last bloke we expected to hear. So you picture 12 grown men jumping over lounges, putting beers on the lounges, hiding behind curtains, and Gus, kept knocking. So Smitty let him in. Said, "Hey, Gus." He said, "Hey, Smitty." He said, "Hey, boys, who are the other boys who are in here? I can see a lot of you. MG, I can see your head sticking above that that light shade." I said, "Yep, that's me." He said, "I've only got 2 words for you, boys, and that's a few words for you." He said, "You've just lost the grand final." We went, "Oh, that's a bit dramatic, isn't it?" But it proved to be right, because we got out in the grand final and we were so emotional that you know what, Dodgy, I've never watched it back, so I can't tell you.
Never watched the 1990 grand final.
No, so I can't tell you much about it. I don't know if we're in the game. I don't even remember the score. I don't remember the score.
18-14. So
really? That close?
It was pretty close.
Yeah, I just remember crying. I remember getting told before the game.
You would have seen the image of you after the game, though. Obviously.
Of course.
It's pretty iconic of you in tears.
Of course. And I got told before the game that if it's out of me and Gary Coyne, there's 27 who were picked for the Kangaroo Tour.
Yeah.
And it was out of me and him for that last spot on the plane. And I've always wanted to go on a Kangaroo Tour. And once we got beaten, that was kind of more so I'm going, well, that's my chance gone.
Yeah.
But word got back to me, and we went back to the club, and Don Feldes made an announcement over the PA saying that, even though it's a bad night for the club, we got beaten in our first grand final, we have got some good news that 4 of our Panthers have been selected to go on the Kangaroo Tour. And they are Greg Alexander, Brad Fittler, Johnny Cartwright, and then there's a pause. And we went, it must be Scarter or Vandy or someone, and said, and Mark Geyer. I went, what? So the agony turned to ecstasy, in a minute, because that was always my dream. And within 2 days, I was on a plane going to England. And the grand final loss was out of my psyche. And going away with these players because don't forget, Doddsy, we didn't have every game televised back in the 80s and 90s. I think Foxtel came in 95, which made every game available. So we would always hear about this bloke in Canberra called Laurie Daly, and this bloke up in Brisbane called Langer, and this other bloke called Lazarus, and this bloke in the city called Blocker Roach, and then you'd only see them play maybe once a month on TV, because it was select games got picked on Saturday games. So then we assembled at the airport, and we went away, and we the 4 of us from Penrith, we grew an inch, because we saw that these guys were just like us. They missed their families. They had down days, they had up days, and it made us a little bit empowered. We came back to the news that we changed our jerseys, went from the chocolate soldiers to the licorice all sorts, which we loved. We all loved the jerseys. We put them on in the pre-season competition, and we got beaten in the grand final by the Broncos up at Darwin. But we knew we had something different. We knew that we were on the something. I think we lost 4 games in 91.
The thing about that 91 grand final, and I mentioned it to Brandy, who's been a guest on the podcast as well, and go back and listen to that episode, is that when you watch that game, there's times where you go, I don't think we're going to win this. This is are you sure we win this? Because
I know
Canberra were very much on top, and was there a feeling though? And I know you went to the sin bin. We know all of that story, but was there a feeling that, particularly when you came back from the bin, that we just can't go through this again? We have to find a way to win.
When I got back from the bin, yes. When the score stayed what it was. But even up to that, even when we're peppering their line and Mal Meningas tackled Greg Barwick and Brad Izzard with an inch, I'm going, this wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
I'm screaming at myself saying, we're going to lose this. We're losing in the grand final. There's like 8 minutes to go on the clock. Wherever it was, the moment we had this move that I come back from it was earlier than that, because I had been Simbin when I'm thinking this. When I got Simbin, I thought that was... At first, I thought Bill Harrigan set me off.
Yeah.
I thought.
What were you complaining to Bill?
I said that the touch judge Martin Weeks was a cheat. I said because we scored a legitimate try.
Yep.
And which was
it was. Yep.
There was no
100%.
There's no way they lost the ball. And I said, you don't want us to win this game because we're from Penrith. And I said, Martin, Weeks, you're a cheat. You are cheating, because that was. And when Bill said you're off, I went. In the grand final, I'm off. And he said, 10 minutes, see you in 10. So I'm walking up the race, and that 10 minutes went for about 2 hours, it felt like. I was just going, oh, my goodness. And then I come back out in the field, and it's still 12-6, so we've held our own. And the game that I have watched 1,000 times back, not like 1990, and I watched our forward pack who when I was off, Roy Simmons, Nobby Clark, Paul Dunn, Barry Walker, Johnny Cartwright, Cole Vandervoort. They just tackled their asses off. And it kind of, I come on with, 20 minutes to go, and you could see them look at me and go, here we go. I'm fresh as a daisy. I've got all this adrenaline running through me. And we used to have a set move called North Sydney. And they called that, and I'm going, I'm supposed to be in this, but where am I supposed to be in it? So all of a sudden I've got this ball from Greg Barwick, and I was supposed to go through as a decoy. So I got it, and I heard Freddie go, MG, and I threw a ball around Steve Walters. Freddie hit the hole, gave it to Brad Izzard under the post. There we go, 12-all. That was the first time I thought we were going to win the grand final. Then when Brandy kicked the field goal, that was kind of when it really hit home, but it didn't hit home until Royce... I got the ball from the dropout, and I thought I was going to score a try. I thought, how good's this? And I heard it again. I heard MG, because Mal Meninga was loitering back on the try line. Tackled me about a metre from the line and saw Royce out the corner of my eye and threw the ball to him. When he scored that try, I have never felt more jubilant in my life. I've had 5 kids. Every one of them's been a blessing, and I've had ecstasy of seeing them. But it's a different feeling. After what happened the year before in 1990, and then going out and winning the comp like we did, I screamed that loud in jubilation, I fractured my larynx.
Yeah.
So I couldn't talk. I thought, but I didn't care, because we partied like there was no tomorrow. And
you're a big partier. Is it the hardest you've ever partied?
Hardest. Well,
never been topped.
I lost my passport and couldn't go to England, unfortunately. So we went up to the Gold Coast.
That's right.
Yeah. So it was either a choice of going to England to play in the Challenge Cup, or going to the Gold Coast with 5 or 6 of my mates plus a couple of players and partying up there for a week. And then we partied. We partied like it was no tomorrow. When we got word that there was people all the way back to Strathfield lining the M4, that was I can't explain. It's something that will stay with me forever, and I'm glad that it's been my best sporting moment by a mile.
Yeah. Obviously, tragedy hits the club and you personally in 1992 with the death of Ben Alexander. For you, and I asked Brandy this as well, how was it dealing with the grief, given that the entire city, I mean, that accident obviously rocked the entire community, and you had to share that grief with them. It wasn't your classic, a personal situation that you're going through that you can deal with and compartmentalise and all of that. You had to deal with all of the media attention and the community attention that came with it. How tough was that?
Look, it's extremely. It's even tough to talk about it. It's one of them things that just rocked us to the core, and everyone had their own ways to deal with the grief. Mine was just to not even think about playing footy. It was the last thing on my mind once that happened, and and then you talk about the media. Yeah, that was one of the reasons we had vigils most nights out the front of Brandy's house there at Narooma Street, this old house. We had bonfires, and some nights we'd have 200 people there. But then once after about a week, when the crowd started to dissipate, the media started to rock up on York Road and you can see the big lenses out, just trying to get photos of the family and photos of us. And Brandy's got a good mate called Pugs who travelled a lot, and he said, "Where can we go right now that will be no one knows? No one will know us." And he said, "Probably the Greek islands. We go to Eos." I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
So about 5 of us, I think, went to Eos, and the irony of that again is that we jumped off this. We've been travelling for 2 days, and a night in Germany, a night in Greece, before we went on the 7-hour boat ride to Eos, and then we've rocked up this port, and we're going up to the town, and it was so old, and it was beautiful around. The water was beautiful, but we didn't give a damn. We were angry. Walked into a bar, this Aussie bar we saw, and on the TV, 48 hours from our home was this 1991 Origin with me and Wally. Could not believe it. The bloke at the bar said, "MG, what are you doing here?" And we told him. He goes, "Oh, fuck, what?" He couldn't believe, didn't hear, hadn't found out yet.
Right.
Hadn't found out what had happened to Ben. So, yeah, Dodgy, Ben would be 50 now, and every year of either his accident or his birthday comes around, and it gets harder. It doesn't get easier, because as we're getting older, we know that there's so much that we wanted him to see as well with our families, and yeah, it's a thing you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy, what the family went through.
And of course, it changes your path completely, and the path of many others, as we know. And you end up at Balmain. You've been on the record as saying not a happy time.
The worst, yeah. I didn't want to play footy. Alan, no one really wanted me, because word got around that I turned into a volatile person, and one person did, but Alan Jones. He said, the Tigers will take him on. So I went down to his Newtown terrace and signed the dotted line, and every day I went to training there. We trained at 3 o'clock most days, so I'd leave Penrith about 1. Every day I'd drive there on the M4, because it was only 2 lanes. I'd think about how I could get out of the training. One day I eventually said, I was in a traffic jam, and I said, stuff it. So it was grid to grid, and I just ran up the arse of the car in front of me and said,
really?
And luckily for me, we weren't travelling fast, but the head trainer who was coming from Campbelltown went past and said, "MG, I'll tell AJ that you won't be at training." I said, "Oh." It was one of my happier days, so I got out of training.
Yeah.
I despised it. But while I was at Balmain, I had a call from Peter Mulholland and Gordon Allen, who was starting up this new franchise called the Western Reds. And that obviously in 95, all these new teams were coming in, and they said, "We want you to be part of it. We've identified you and Brad Mackay as our 2 marquee signings." So I didn't tell Jonesy that, and so I said, "Yep, 3-year deal, 180 grand a year." I signed. Went over to Perth, and I played. Rewind. I went to Yamina in 1994 for a year. That was again wild days. But then in that time we became pregnant. Me and my wife became pregnant with our first kid, and we went over. Megs went to Perth. We went over to Perth in late '94, very heavily pregnant. Stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks. Just got back to some normality. Bought a house quickly, and within 2 games over there, we learned that Super League was upon us.
Yeah.
So we kind of went from this Western Reds to saying that we can't afford to, because back then Western Reds had to pay for every other team to come over.
Yep.
Their airfares, their hotel,
yeah.
not the NRL. not the ARL, not the New South Wales Rugby League, but them.
Yeah.
So they were broke in 2 months.
Yeah.
So we went to Super League. I went from 180 grand a year to 600 grand a year.
I mean, it was a great time to be in football, right?
I went from broke
Yeah.
to buying a house on the beach.
Yeah.
And things happen for reasons, I believe. And then Western Reds were about to fold in 1997, the end of it.
Yeah, and you get to come back home.
I had to put my tail between my legs, and there was a lot of bridges I had to mend with a lot of people, because I left in not real good terms with a lot of people who I was about to see again for the first time.
Yeah.
And I had to ring all them.
So a lot of those faces were still around the club in
most,
official roles.
Most were.
Yeah.
Yeah, most were. Most were in some capacity. Even Simo was sceptical. He said, "Mate, big fella, I've seen the bloke you've become, and it's scary." I said, "I promise I've changed. I've got 3 kids now, which I had. I had changed. And when I was in Perth, I had my first kid. I wasn't this guy who was that 93, 94 bloke. Them 2 years were the worst 2 years of my life." I turned. I come back as a 30-year-old. I went from being I went away being this young kid who won a comp to basically coming back as a mentor to Tony Pullator, Frank Pullator, Ned Kadich, and all these other young blokes, Reece Wesser, who I loved it. Yeah. I loved it. The last 3 years here were 3 of my most enjoyable, and I look back at fondly. I look back on the 3 years I had back here just as fondly as I look at the first 4 or 5 years I had before I left.
Of course, post footy, you stay in Penrith. I'm guessing you're never going to leave Penrith. You feel that the Penrith community is home. You've got a house there in South Penrith, and that's the base.
Not far from your parents,
that's
brother.
Yes, that's the base.
That's the base.
Never going?
Never going. No, I love it. I've my mantra was when I first retired was I wanted to be in the media. I got told that I did a bit while I was playing, a bit on the footy show, a bit of that. And I said to myself, I'm never going to say no to anything. So my first gig was to do something with C91.3 in Campbelltown. Yep. On a Friday and a Monday, I'll do a review and a preview. And then I worked with ABC Radio on Sideline Eye. Then I was in the box with 2GB for a while, 2UE, 2SM. Then I got a job with my current employer, which was to Triple M in 2007, doing Dead Set Legends on a Saturday with Rabs and Billy Birmingham and Dan Ganane. And so that was it. Started Brekkie Radio 2009, left that in 2018, done my own show for 4 years with the Rush Hour. Now I'm back on Brekkie, where I get it's changed a bit, Dodgy, because now what COVID brought us was that you can do a lot of things from home. Yes. I.e., they set me up a studio at my gym, they set up a studio at my home, so I do...
And there was a time they would have tried to hide that.
Of course.
These days it's it's pretty expected that's a possibility to happen.
How good. How good.
Yeah.
COVID wasn't good. COVID sucks. Of course. But for that, they've set up a studio and stuff, and I can do that. I do Mondays and Thursdays usually from home. Yep. And then the rest of the days I go in the studio.
And, of course, MG Active. You started this gym. We used to see the Instagram and Facebook videos of you just at home. You'd get a whiteboard up. A few mates would come around, and these are the exercises for the day.
It was. It was Wild Panther Fitness then.
Yeah, and that's obviously where it all started.
Yeah, it was.
You decided then to open up the gym on York Road, and how's that all going?
To the first part of that, it was. I converted my carport into a gym in 2014. And I started off with a mate coming over to work out. That turned into 10 mates. And then in about 2018, when I left the Brekkie show, I started to think about opening up a gym. So I was looking at potential locations around the Penrith area. And I used to go to Kingsgrove Sports all the time for my kids. I used to go there for netballs and footballs and cricket gear. And they were a great bunch of people. And one day I was in there, he said, we're moving out. I said, fair dinkum. And so it was up for lease, and I went, this is it. I'm going to dive in. Signed a five-year lease on it. My son and daughter, Logan and Montana, both run the gym with me. They've both got their Cert 3 and Cert 4s as well. And basically, Dodsy, what's different about MG Active is that there's no mirrors at our gym. So that means there's no expectations, and no one's looking at themselves thinking I should be doing something better, because it's I kind of look at it as more of a club than a gym. Yep. We've got 200, and I opened the gym, I think 22 2020, the first in March. So the first batch of COVID was about to hit us.
Yeah.
I've been closed for 6 months out of the 2 years we've been open, 2.5 years. But good landlords, Rain and Horn looked after us, thanks to Cole Henry, because without that we were stuffed. But yeah, I love it. About to do a challenge. So if anyone wants to join the challenge, it's this starts this Saturday. I'm not sure when this will air, but
Well, it'll probably be on already, but that doesn't mean they can't come and...
yeah, come to the gym. You know, honestly, 5-day free trial. Go to our website if you want, and I can guarantee that one time you come to the gym and do a class with like-minded people, you'll never look back.
2 more questions. Number 1, and this one is going to get you, I'm sure, thinking, but we'll see how you go. We've been talking in the office about how you've got all these series now. Obviously, Michael Jordan with The Last Dance, and winning time with the LA Lakers, and
isn't that good?
It's great. And we've come up with Chocolate Soldiers to talk about that era of the 80s, 90s,
Love it.
We want to know who you would like to play you in this series.
Wow. Well, what, out of the current players or an actor?
No, an actor.
Oh, an actor.
Which actor would you like to be? MG?
Well, I suppose. Look, I think Hugh Jackman's got to shave his head and grow a beard. I think I've got to go to the top.
Similar physiques.
I've got very tall. We're both tall and slim.
There you go.
So Hugh Jackman will be the top of the tree. And look, he's. I love these series. I love the fact that there's a lot of these going around. I think Magic Johnson's actually about to do one.
Yep.
Scottie Pippen's doing one.
And I think Stan's actually following the rise of the Dolphins and Wayne Bennett as well. So,
Wow.
to do an Aussie NRL one. Which
Well, they're the way. That's all. That's Netflix and Stan and stuff. It's changed the way I watch TV.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's your favourite series of all time on Netflix? What do you like?
I'd
Game of
say,
Thrones, man.
More of an Ozark kind of.
How good's Ozark?
Breaking Bad.
Ozark.
Those sort of things.
That's Walter. I'm Walter.
Yeah, that's true.
What about Ozark's? They reckon the next 7 episodes are supposed to be the best TV you'll ever see.
Yeah. Are you a binger or are you a week-to-week watcher? You prefer to watch week to week?
Binger. Because I've just watched Gaslit.
Yes.
The first episode. I'm like, where's more?
Yeah.
But it's week to week. So no, Megs, we love watching like 5 or 6 in a row. We find ourselves is it 10:30 at night already? But yeah, we love our Netflix.
Last question, and it is an interesting one because you have had so many, I guess, iterations of yourself over the years, known as the firebrand, and then turned it all around, family man, business owner. How would you like to be remembered in Penrith?
Loyal. I'm a very loyal man. I'm a very generous man, and I care a lot about other people. So I want to. If I've never really thought about what I want on my headstone because. That's a little bit morbid, but I think it's just a bloke who loved his family to pieces, and the family are my life. Everything about my life is revolves around my family, and I think people, when they look back at me, they'll think I was a gentle giant who gave a damn.
Good on you, MG. Well, we could talk for hours, but we will leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the record.
Keep up the great work, Doddsy. You're kicking ass, brother.
Thank you, mate. And I hope you enjoyed our chat. On the Record is produced by The Western Weekender. To hear future episodes, search Western Weekender wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you hit subscribe. Check out westernweekender.com.au, and we'll see you next time.